What's up, everyone? I'm Alex. I'm the co-founder of Morning Brew, and we make business news less shitty. Every single week, I am asked the same exact question by so many entrepreneurs. How did you know when to go all in? How did you know when to take the leap into entrepreneurship and quit your dream job in finance? And when I talk to people about this question, I think they expect a silver bullet, a clear moment in time when it was so obvious that going all in was the right answer. Well, I'm sorry to say, it's not that simple. The decision is messy. It never feels obvious. I was in your shoes 7 years ago, and I remember it like yesterday, but I will say over years, I picked up tools that helped make the decision a little bit easier. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand what those tools are so you can make the decision for yourself. 1, 2, just a little bit of mayonnaise. So let me just fill you in on the story. Senior year at the University of Michigan, I start this thing, Morning Brew. It's a newsletter to help people stay up to date with the business world. And I started it because I wanted to keep my brain fresh for my job out of school, and students wanted help preparing for interviews, and I think this could help them. I found myself at a crossroads for the first time ever a few months into this business. Very simply, I had to make the decision. Do I go and work full-time at Morgan Stanley? This job that I literally had dreamed of working in since I was a kid, where in my childhood room, I had a whiteboard that said, be the best trader in the world, or this thing, Morning Brew, which is giving me a ton of energy. Which one do I choose? It was towards the end of senior year at Michigan. I'm about to graduate. This is me, fresh-faced Alex, 21 years old. My mom, Stacy, my sister, Sydney. And for the first time, I'm thinking to myself, should I actually go all in on Morning Brew? In a lot of ways, my heart was telling me that I should. People were starting to talk about this newsletter. We were getting more subscribers. I was getting invited to classes to pitch our business in front of 500 students at a time. 450 would sign up on the spot. It felt like we had momentum. I felt like I was good at this entrepreneurship thing, and I loved selling and storytelling the business. But then on the other hand, my brain was telling me it's not time. I was about to make $85,000 working in my dream job, having financial independence, living in New York City. Meanwhile, remember my mom, this lady, Stacy? Stacy worked on Wall Street for 20 years. She was successful in what she did. And I just envisioned having this conversation with her where I was going to tell her, hey, you know what? This dream job I have in finance, this stable path, yeah, I'm going to quit that and go spend all of my time on a newsletter that doesn't make any money. I think she literally would have chopped my head off. It just felt like this tug between my head and my heart, and my head won. I decided to go full time on Morgan Stanley with Morning Brew as my side hustle. Okay, so you're gonna hear in a minute how this decision just kept getting harder and harder and harder. But first, I just wanna let you know this video is sponsored by Walmart Marketplace, and more on them in a few minutes. So, working at Morgan Stanley.
Hi, my name is Alex Lieberman, and I am 22 years old. I am now trading at Morgan Stanley.
Let's talk about that. It was very quickly not what I had expected. First of all, I went to work at this dream job in finance because I expected a stable career, something that for the next 30 years, I wouldn't have questions of if I'm gonna keep my job or get fired. 3 months into working at this bank, 25% of my entire division was fired within 3 hours. I literally remember sitting at the trading desk, watching my phone that had all these lines light up as people were called into a back office so HR could let them go. I remember people standing up, saying bye to colleagues that they had literally been working with for 10 to 15 years. So all of a sudden, this stable career wasn't looking so stable after all. Now, add in the fact that, again, my entire life, I had been planning to be the world's greatest trader. But very quickly, I was finding out and realizing that I was actually kind of mediocre at my job. I was working on a desk with a bunch of math geniuses, people who studied math and physics at Ivy League schools, and I was just this business student from Michigan. The worse that I was feeling about Morgan Stanley, the more I was feeling excited about Morning Brew. I really started asking myself the question, am I gonna just spend the next 30 years of my career being mediocre working in finance, or is there another path that makes sense? Okay, let me paint a picture for you. My typical day while I was working at Morgan Stanley would start at like 5 a.m. I'd wake up in a windowless room in Manhattan. I had 4 roommates. Yes, I was living in a 5-bedroom. I would go to the office, work out, get to the desk at 6:30. And from 6:30 to basically 7 o'clock, I was like a keyboard warrior. Trading, my boss was the absolute worst. I literally couldn't go to the bathroom during the day. I'd finish around 7. I'd make my way back home to Kips Bay, and I'd make dinner and start working on Morning Brew at 8 p.m. And from 8 p.m. for the next like 3 hours or until I fell asleep with my laptop on my lap, I'd be working on the brew and I'd feel so energized. And it's like this weird thing, right? I should be exhausted at the end of the day, but I felt more excited about the work I was doing in those 3 hours than the previous 12 hours of my day. At the same time, right, my energy's building up around Morning Brew. We're also starting to see that this thing could look more and more like a business. At the time, there was this business, The Skim, that had 3.5 million subscribers. They were making millions of dollars in revenue. They had raised money from a lot of top venture capitalists. And my co-founder and I were starting to be like, oh wow, there's actually a path to making a lot of money on your newsletter. In the beginning, we said there was no shot we could actually make money from a newsletter business, but we started to think, well, actually, if we get to a certain size, we can totally replace our salaries. And so all this is going on, and then pressure just continues to build as my co-founder, Austin, who was a senior at Michigan at the time, he starts telling me that he has to make a decision about whether he's gonna go work in investment banking and make probably $150,000 a year, or choose his path of going full-time on Morning Brew. And if he did that, I knew I had to do it also. And so for the second time, I'm faced with this same exact decision. Do I go all in on Morning Brew, or do I stay with the quote unquote safe play at Morgan Stanley? I remember it like it was yesterday. Austin and I met up for beers at a bar in Irving Place, and we basically had the decision to make. Are we doing this damn thing? And as we were talking, I just remember asking myself a very simple question. What would I regret more? Would I more regret quitting my job at Morgan Stanley, going all in on Morning Brew, having it fail and then figuring out what I had to do next? Or would I more regret staying at Morgan Stanley and watching someone else build their version of Morning Brew because they were willing to take the risk? So even though that answer was clear for me, and this seesaw between Morgan Stanley and Morning Brew was starting to tip in the direction of the brew, I still couldn't make up my mind. We're at a point where we still weren't making money as a business, and it wasn't clear we'd be able to make enough to actually live in New York City, which was important to both of us. But then shit hit the fan. Probably a year into my job at Morgan Stanley, and I get this random call while I'm sitting at the trading desk from HR. They say that I have to meet them in a meeting room immediately, and they provide no other context. I get in there, and there are 3 Morgan Stanley lawyers who are dressed in full suits. They ask me to sit down, and the first thing that they say is, Alex, we represent Morgan Stanley and not you. And then they proceed to grill me for an hour straight about my involvement with Morning Brew. Long story short, they tell me they don't want me working on the brew anymore, and I end up leaving this meeting not only incredibly pissed, but at this point I am ready to go all in. Emotionally, my heart is completely out of Morgan Stanley, completely in Morning Brew, and I need to figure out how we're gonna make this a business so I can go and actually hire employees, because we're going from side hustle to real thing.
3rd floor.
Yo, what's up? What's going on? Good to see you. At this point, I'm probably telling my friends weekly that this is going to be the week that I quit my job and I go all in on Morning Brew.
I feel like the Morgan Stanley quitting process transpired over like 8 months.
And then we're kind of over it. We're like, all right, we don't believe him anymore. He's like the boy who cried quit.
But what I realize is that my head isn't there yet. I need to get my head to a place where I know I've thought through every single nuance of this decision, and I'm at peace with the decision, the big decision I'm about to make. And so there are 2 ways I get to that place. The first involves asking myself a very simple but profound question. That question is, what if I fail? What if I fail? What if the worst case scenario happens? Then what? And so I play out the scenario. The worst case scenario is that I go full-time on Morning Brew. 6 months in, it fails because most startups do fail. And then I say to myself, then what? Well, I think through my options. Well, maybe then I could go back to Morgan Stanley because I had this interesting experience that could make me a better trader. Then I say, okay, but let's say I can't do that. Then I maybe could apply to business school because this is a really good story that maybe could get me into a good business school. But let's just say that's not an option. Maybe I've met entrepreneurs in New York City and I can either start a new business with them or join their startup. But let's say that's not an option. Maybe I can just apply to any job like normal people do and get a job. And so I get 4 layers down and I ask myself, Alex, if this all happens and I don't have any of these options, is this a morning brew problem? And the answer is no. It wouldn't be morning brew that caused this. It would be because Alex Lieberman didn't keep his options open. And so what I realized in going through this whole exercise is the worst case scenario isn't that bad. And without knowing it, I had gone through Tim Ferriss's entire fear setting exercise. But there's one other thing that really made all the difference in the world. I want to show you something. This is little Alex. This is my dad, Bruce. So it just so happens that my dad, Bruce, was a trader on Wall Street, trading the exact same product that I was trading after college. My dad worked on Wall Street for 20 years. And when I was a junior at the University of Michigan, he passed away suddenly from a stroke. And so I deeply feared that I was headed down the same exact path of my dad. And I asked myself a question, the question that really would change everything and lead to my decision. If I was on my deathbed tomorrow, what would I rather say that I was doing? Building my own thing, being excited and passionate about the vision that I was working towards, or working a finance job that I really wasn't that excited about and I didn't feel that good at? The answer became so glaringly obvious to me, and the decision was so crystal clear. I was ready to pull the trigger.
I think it was around the third time where he committed to it, and I don't think we celebrated him that last time because none of us believed him, but he actually followed through with it.
The fear factor of letting him leave something that was known for something that was unknown was very scary. My father is his mentor, who also worked on Wall Street. My dad had sat down with him and, basically asked him for a business plan and said, bulleted questions at him, and came out of that saying he's got answers to every question. We need to let him try it. Obviously, it was the right decision.
I remember it like it was yesterday. It was right after Labor Day of 2016. And I told my boss that I was going all in on morning brew. I put in my 2 weeks. By the way, Austin had also decided he was going to reject his job in banking. We ultimately had to figure out a way to make enough money for us to live in New York City. We ran the numbers and it was simple. $60,000 a year for Austin, $60,000 a year for me. We had to make $120,000 a year in order to live in New York City and keep running this business. But the only issue is we weren't making money yet. We hadn't ever raised money from investors and we had no employees. That was our next big challenge, but spoiler alert, we figured it out. And in a future episode, I'll take you through how we did it. We started with 50,000 subscribers, $0 in revenue, and 0 employees. Now it has 4.25 million subscribers. We're doing tens of millions of dollars a year in revenue. And ultimately, in 2020, we sold the company. And the thing that drives me today is very different from what drove me in the early days of Morning Brew. Today, I get joy from sharing the lessons we've learned over this last decade with other entrepreneurs who have a similar vision to the one we had when we were starting the business back in 2015. So if you were to ask me, Alex, how did you know it was time to go all in? Here is the honest answer. I didn't. I didn't know that it was the right answer at the exact moment I decided to quit my job in finance. This is a messy decision. It's hard. It is not clear-cut. But I use these different tools, regret minimization, fear setting, energy following, to make the decision-making process easier and also to make me realize that ultimately going all in was not a leap of faith. A new seller's plans and goals usually boil down to one single desire: getting your product in front of millions of customers. After all, visibility is everything, and that is exactly what Walmart Marketplace can give you. Walmart.com has more than 120 million unique monthly visitors, according to Comscore, making Walmart Marketplace one of the fastest growing e-commerce platforms. Now, they want to help sellers bask in this glory. New sellers who join Walmart Marketplace today can save up to 50% off referral and fulfillment fees. Conditions apply. To unlock this deal, gain access to millions of customers, and enjoy the scale of one of the world's biggest retailers, go to marketplace.walmart.com/FJ.